Absolutely. I think you're sure.
Sit on this side, Governor. We'll tilt the thing this way.
Exactly. Oh, okay. Tilt it left. These voice activated? Yeah. First place I went to the wrong building.
Did you go to the new building?
No, I went to... So you're in D.C. now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I do criminal justice.
Oh, Green Lane?
Yeah. I do it for nonprofits. I do it for business. So, yeah, like helping businesses do second chance.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here to join into a discussion that I believe is about one of the most important changes that we can make to the criminal justice system, and that really is prison reform. My name is Charlie McKenna, and I will be the moderator for our panel of experts here today. I want to start by thanking Kean University, and in particular the Kean University School of Criminal Justice and Public Administration for hosting us here today. And we have with us today an incredibly accomplished panel that is filled with people who are vastly knowledgeable about the issues that we'll be discussing today. So I want to introduce them, and I'm going to start with Governor Jim Mcgreevey. He's a person who has devoted pretty much his entire life to public service. Governor Mcgreevey started out as an assistant prosecutor in Middlesex County. He eventually served as the mayor of Woodbridge, one of New Jersey's largest municipalities, and he was the mayor there for 10 years. He was a state assemblyman, a state senator, and he was elected as the state of New Jersey's 52nd governor in 2001. He also served as a regional manager for Merck & Company and as the executive director of the New Jersey State Parole Board. Now, many people, when they finish their service as governor, they go to work in business and seek fortune, if not fame. That is not the case with Governor Mcgreevey. Instead, after his governorship, he has continued to serve people, especially those who have been imprisoned. He obtained a Master's of Divinity from the General Theological Seminary. Governor Mcgreevey served his field education in furtherance of his degree, working with formerly incarcerated women and men at Exodus Transition Ministry in Harlem, New York. He completed his pastoral care at the former Cabrini Hospice and Long-Term Health Care Center. He has kept on in his care for the incarcerated once he was awarded his degree, and he now serves as the executive director of the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, which provides critically needed services to assist persons returning from incarceration to successfully reintegrate into our society. Those services include the integration of addiction treatment, sober housing, employment and training, identification and legal services, and linkage to Medicaid and medical and behavioral health care for formerly incarcerated individuals. The NJCR has 10 reentry sites, which are in Elizabeth, Hackensack, Jersey City, Kearney, which is the Community Resource Center and the Governor's Reentry Training and Employment Center, Neptune, New Brunswick, Newark, Patterson, and Toms River. The clients of the NJRC have these are amazing statistics because, generally speaking, people who come through the system and do not have reentry services oftentimes will find themselves back in the system. But the clients of the NJRC have a 19.7% recidivism rate, a 10% incarceration rate, and an annualized rate of employment between 58 and 62%, which is seasonally adjusted, and those are pretty amazing statistics. Governor Mcgreevey also worked with women of the Integrity House program at the Hudson County Correctional Center in New Jersey. He guided and directed the Integrity House initiatives, spiritual counseling, as well as counseled women upon discharge. Governor Mcgreevey received his bachelor's degree from Columbia College.
Stop it.
Gov?
Can I just jump in? So, like Mark Twain said, they call heavyset guys slim, bald guys curly, and elected officials honorable. But in any event, that's a joke. But as my father would say, somebody should only hear those words when they're in a prone position. So, thank you.
Well, you're not quite prone, but you have an incredible...
Getting closer than I would want to.
I'm working up to this for the students. But anyway, I want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, my friend.
So being introduced after the governor is never easy. But John Farmer is somebody who's actually up to the task. He's got about 18 jobs, and I'm really glad that he was able to hear. He's presently the director of the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University. He's a university professor of law. He's the Justice Allen B. Handler Scholar, and he is also the director of the Miller Center for Community Protection and Resilience. It's a rather exhausting to say, let alone to wear all of those hats. John was appointed to the Eagleton Institute director in September of 2019, and he continues his leadership of the Miller Center for Community Protection and Resilience, which also is housed and affiliated with Eagleton at Rutgers University. John's career has spanned service in high-profile government appointments, private practice, and diverse areas of the criminal law. He began his career as a law clerk to Associate Justice Allen B. Handler of the New Jersey Supreme Court. He worked as an associate at Riker Danzig, which is a firm that I am presently at. He next joined the Office of the U.S. Attorney in Newark, where he achieved the U.S. Attorney's Special Achievement Award for Sustained Superior Performance. And it was at the U.S. Attorney's Office where I first met John, and we were colleagues. He left the U.S. Attorney's Office to join the administration of New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman in 1994, where he served as Assistant Counsel, Deputy Chief Counsel, and then Chief Counsel to the Governor. From 1999 to 2002, he served as the Attorney General for the state of New Jersey. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, I think for 90 minutes you were the governor of the state?
Yes, to paraphrase Thomas Jefferson, he governed best who governed least.
So we have two ex-governors here with us today. But after being Attorney General, John served as Senior Counsel and Team Leader for the 9/11 Commission, and in that capacity he led the investigation of the country's preparedness for and response to the terrorist attacks of September 11th, and he was the principal author of the Commission's final report. He also wrote a book on it. His book is called The Ground Truth, The Story Behind America's Defense on 9/11, and it was named a New York Times notable book. He did a stint in private practice as a partner at K&L Gates, and in 2007 he became a founding partner of Arsenault, Whipple, Farmer, Fassett, and Azzarello. There's a lot of words in that name. In addition to his law practice, in 2008 he served as senior advisor to General James Jones, the special envoy for the Middle East regional security, on development of a new rule of law in the Palestinian Authority territory. And he was invited by the U.S. Embassy in Armenia to assist the nation's legislative commission in investigating widespread violence and unrest following the elections there. He was recruited to become the Dean of Rutgers Law School in 2009 and served in that capacity until 2013, when he was asked to be the Vice President and General Counsel of Rutgers. I'm going to short-circuit this a little bit, but John served as a member of the Advisory Committee on Judicial Conduct from 2007 to 2014. In 2012, John received the Justice William Brennan Jr. Award from the Association of the Federal Bar for New Jersey and the Distinguished Public Service Award for Leadership. One of the things that I find about John is he is an astute student of the blues, and he's in the process, if it ever gets out, of writing a book about a blues musician, and I look forward to reading that. And he's earned his BA and JD degrees from Georgetown University.
Any day now.
You keep saying that. To John's left, your right, is John Kufos, who's someone whose story is just as compelling as our other panelists, if not more so. He helps companies optimize second chance hiring and mitigate risk. His work has helped thousands of people with criminal records secure jobs. He is a nationally recognized criminal justice advocate with deep experience building and leading criminal justice organizations and campaigns. He has worked with multiple presidential administrations, dozens of governors and cabinet members, and countless business and nonprofits. He recently served as the executive director of Safe Streets and Second Chances, and previously he served as the executive director of the New Jersey Reentry Corporation. His leadership in business community was recognized in 2016 when NJ Biz named him one of New Jersey's top 40 under 40. He is a regular speaker on criminal justice, healthcare, social determinants, workforce development, and he helps cities, states, and the federal government optimize their reentry systems. He's been interviewed by almost every major news source and written about by almost every major newspaper in this country. He is a certified criminal trial attorney by the New Jersey Supreme Court. He was. And he has lived experiences in the New Jersey State Prison after a successful career as a criminal defense lawyer and a civil rights lawyer. So we'll hear a little bit more about his story when he chats. And last but not least, he is more than the executive director of the Kane University School of Criminal Justice and Public Administration. He is also a subject matter expert on prisons, having spent a large part of his professional career working in the prison system in various capacities. Dr. McMenamin began his career in the prison system in 1973 when he joined the Illinois Department of Corrections as a security officer in the Peoria Community Correctional Center. He was promoted to shift commander in 1975, and in 1976 he was promoted to clinical services as a counselor. He became the superintendent of the Urbana Community Correctional Center in 1977 and regional supervisor for the Southern District in 1979. He remained in that position until 1988, when he was wisely left the state of Illinois for New Jersey, where he became the warden of jails in Mercer County, a position that he held until 1999, when he was awarded the National Institute of Justice grant to conduct research into New Jersey's No Early Release Act and the effect of good time credit on inmate behavior. He completed the research and joined the faculty of William Patterson College, ultimately and wisely again moved over to Kane University, and he is currently the executive director of the School of Criminal Justice and Public Administration. Pat also serves as a certified expert witness for the United States, in the United States federal courts and in New Jersey and California state courts for prison, jail administrations, and inmates' rights. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the panel that we're lucky enough to have with us today, and I'm really glad to be able to moderate and hear what they have to say. And to all of you students that are here today with us or watching on Facebook, if you're trying to decide what to do with yourselves upon graduation, please do not discount public service, because as you see with each one of these individuals, they have had incredible careers and they have been able to affect positive change in their communities and the world around them because they chose to go into public service rather than private practice. So if you want your lives to have impact, public service is perhaps the best way to see that through. So please do not discount it. Our prison system, at least in my mind, is broken. And it is not broken for any one reason. For me, it's a systemic problem, and one born, I believe, of a lack of cohesive philosophical belief in what our prison system should be doing for its inmates. To complicate matters, the United States doesn't have one criminal justice system. We have thousands of federal, state, local, and tribal systems. Together, those systems hold over 2 million people in 1,566 state prisons, 102 federal prisons, 2,850 local jails, 1,510 juvenile correctional facilities, 186 immigration detention facilities, 82 Native American country jails, as well as in military prisons, civil commitment centers, state psychiatric hospitals, and prisons in the United States territories. The United States has the largest prison population in the world. We have the highest per capita incarceration rate of any country in the world, and 1 out of every 5 prisoners worldwide is a prisoner in the United States of America. And our prison system has not really changed since the formation of the Republic. New Jersey is a prime example of that. The 1798 New Jersey Penitentiary House, which was the first prison in New Jersey, is the oldest building still in operation as part of a prison system in the United States today. It became Trenton State Prison and is now called New Jersey State Prison. That is an astounding and perhaps sad fact. It was built over 224 years ago, and it is still operating, albeit in a renovated form. Unfortunately, however, the system and the manner in which we treat prisoners is as old and as antiquated as that building itself. I subscribe to the idea put forth by Richard Nygaard of the Third Circuit Court of Appeals that there are essentially 3 basic types of people in our prison system. There are those people in our prison system who need no help whatsoever. These are people who have committed crimes, those crimes were aberrational, and they will never so much as litter when they get out. On the other end of the spectrum, however, there are those people who, no matter how much we do for them, they will perhaps never change their criminal ways. They are incurably sociopathic and will probably never change. It is, however, the huge swath in the middle that I believe the prison system fails on a daily basis. The system does not put them in a position or give them the tools they need to succeed once they are out of prison. There is now a growing consensus based upon empirical literature that incarceration actually compounds criminogenic needs and increases the barriers that await those re-entering our communities. What that means is when they get out, they will return to crime and re-enter the system. That makes society less safe. But enough of my pontificating. I would now like to ask Governor Mcgreevey to talk about what he does with his reentry work and ask him how prisons can do a better job in assisting you in what you do.
Thanks, Charlie. And first, I just want to say it's good to be at King University, and President Repollet, and also my dear friend, President Farahi. And I also have to recognize the real Craig Coughlin. Craig works in government affairs, and he has got a great governmental knowledge, not because of his father, more importantly his mother, who spearheaded my mayoral re-election in Woodbridge. So, and my father is on his father's payroll, so I just want to make sure I do my politics. So just a couple things that I think are really important. I appreciate what Charlie said, and obviously it's a testament to everyone's shared affection for our moderator. This is one of the few issues, I think, on the American landscape where Republicans and Democrats actually can agree about something, and that is the bloody thing doesn't work. And so the question becomes is, if you look at longitudinal outcomes, what's the effect of incarceration? And I think, as Charles said, is what we see is it actually exacerbates the trauma. People having been in prison over an extended period of time, the trauma of being in prison actually will worsen their psychiatric, their addiction needs, and their abilities to reenter society. I'll tell you what I think is the problem, and then specifically where we focus in on. So the first point is it's the world of the John Farmers and the John Kufos, namely our criminal justice system. So I perceive, and I'm not as illuminated as these two gentlemen, but I perceive our system to be binary. Persons are either guilty or innocent. And it's not about reconstructing their lives. It's not about putting them back together. It's not about addressing their addiction. It's not about addressing their mental health illness. It's not about their failure of a public school system to provide for them with a marketable skill and a competitive workplace. It's not about any of that. It's about guilt or innocence. I remember when I was a young assistant prosecutor, it's working diligently and assiduously to secure guilty, conviction, and on the other side, there were people that were worried about innocence. So part of it is, I think, is that our criminal justice system has this binary focus, which doesn't enable us to do what I think it is that we ought to do. So one is, I would say, one of the real problems on the outset is a criminal justice system that doesn't look at reconstructing either the life of the victim or the life of the perpetrator in a meaningful, significant way. And I would also argue, to piggyback on what Charlie said, is that just as our prison system is somewhat antiquated, so is our judicial system in terms of our focus. You look at different countries such as Portugal and how they focus upon controlled dangerous substances and the focus on treatment as opposed to punishment. You look at the Scandinavian nations and how they approach incarceration, and it's about readjustment back into society. So the first point is the binary nature. The second point is what I do for a living, I think we should be doing throughout the entirety of the justice system. Not to say that obviously ascertaining guilt or innocence isn't a critical threshold need, but it's what we do with that. And so what we do in reentry, and I'll try to be as succinct as possible, I promise you I'll be shorter than my introduction, is that we try to bring people back into a measured sensibility in the center. And what we do is, so Jim Mcgreevey comes out of Newark State Prison. Typically I'll come out, I won't have an ID, I won't have SNAP or food stamps, I won't have general assistance or housing, I won't have Medicaid, I won't even have, so I can't access my Suboxone if I have a heroin addiction and I'm on Suboxone. So what we try to do is we try to do 5 basic things, and simple, basic things, and we try to do them well. Fewer things well. One is we link people to medical services, and that is a disproportionate share of our folks suffer from hepatitis, diabetes, high blood pressure, HIV, and behavioral concerns, whether it's psych, depression, anxiety, and particularly addiction. 74 to 76% of our folks suffer from addiction, approximately 47% opioid use disorder, and there's no heroin in the heroin anymore. It's all fentanyl. And now with increasing probability, ISO. So what we see is a scourge of fentanyl. I mean, literally, we test our folks at one of our sites. At one of our sites, literally nobody is testing for heroin anymore. There's no heroin in the heroin. It's just pure fentanyl. So the first thing is we try to link people to medical services. So that's medical services, as in traditional medical, including OBGYN, including hepatitis, yada, 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 critically needed medical services and behavioral services, critically important. 2, it's legal services. And John, who was, I would like to say my predecessor as executive director was far more proficient at this than I am, namely John Kufos, but I'll make up for it. But we provide legal services, and so we have a legal point of contact that cleans up what I would call the wreckage of their past lives. Outstanding warrants and fines and pernicious individuals like farmer and prosecutors and attorney generals will make our people know. But so we try to clean up their record so they can get a MVC ID, they can get an MVC driver's license. You know, I just parenthetically, I take a caseload, so I stay in the real world, so I just don't like rub shoulders with muckety mucks up here. I was on the phone with MVC with their number, press 1, press 2. I got this woman on the call and she said, and like literally, I'm on Summit Avenue, I'm in Jersey City, and she says, well, he has warrants and this. I said, well, can I ask you a question? She said, no, I can't take this question. I'm like, bang, zoom.
How do you get him to pick up the phone? I can't get him to pick up the phone.
You know, I'm not sure she was human. But in any event, so that we try for legal services to get people an ID, because you need an ID, right? You need an ID to get food stamps. You need an ID to get Medicaid. If you don't have an ID, you can't say that Jim Mcgreevey is Jim Mcgreevey. If I can't demonstrate who I am, I can't get these basic state benefits. I can't get federal benefits, right? So it's legal services, and then 3 is all the state and federal benefits. So at the end of the day, our guys, go figure, like to eat the day they come out of prison. People say, well, we'll go through a process and then whatever. Well, you know, process, you get awfully hungry after a process. So what we try to do is we try to give them state benefits immediately. We try to give them SNAP, food stamps, GA, housing immediately, and most importantly, Medicaid, particularly if they're on Suboxone. Because if they're not on Suboxone and they have a heroin habit, guess what? They're going to go back to the street on the corner of XYZ Street and pick up a literally $2 bag of fentanyl, and there's probably a 144% chance that they will overdose. So that's critically important. Fourth is employment and training and employment. We have a training center. We do everything now. We do phlebotomy. We do CDL. We do HVAC. We do welding. We do Cisco certification, training, employment. And lastly, we link people to housing. So those are our 5 basic services. I'd like to think we do them pretty well. And what it's so much about what we do is we're hands-on. And just parenthetically, in Trenton, I'm probably always with the PDs, you know, because I want more progressive. But in individual county courts, I work with the prosecutors. Because going back to that binary system, public defenders are like, all right, goodbye. And I'm like, no. He's an addict. He needs Suboxone. He needs treatment. No, he needs housing. No, she needs to see an OBGYN. I'm not about just letting people go to the streets. Chaos isn't my thing. It's about structure. And that's what, God willing, we're about. And we have the numbers, and it's no small measure to the collective people. And I just want to say thank you. I didn't know how many people were going to be here today. I figured Charlie was giving out baguettes and muffins and hot coffee, so I'm pleasantly surprised how many people are here. So one, I want to say thank you to all of you, and I want to say thank you for giving a damn. As Charlie said in the introduction, we're 5% of the world's population. We're 25% of the world's incarcerated population. We incarcerate more of our fellow citizens than any country in the world. Number 2 is Russia, not the best company. It's not that Americans are more malevolent, it's that we adopted a British colonial system that the British don't use anymore. Being Irish, I can say that. But in any event, I just appreciate you being here. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Governor. John Farmer, how can the prisons change to either put Governor Mcgreevey out of business or to certainly to make his life easier?
Thanks, Charlie. Well, first I want to just note and thank Governor Mcgreevey because you've developed a constituency for an issue that didn't have one for the longest time. As I was nearing the end of my tenure as Attorney General, we actually developed an initiative on reentry because we knew that there was a flood coming. People who had been incarcerated in the 1990s who were about to leave prison, and there was absolutely nothing in place for them to adjust to the so-called real world. But there was no interest. I mean, in the legislature and around the state, in the county prosecutor's offices, we were not able to generate any support for that at all. So after I left office and joined the Institute for Social Justice, we started doing these convenings to try to build a constituency. It really didn't happen. So it's really thanks to Governor Mcgreevey and Madeline Arleo and people like that who really picked up the cause and have developed a constituency for something that should have had one all along but hasn't. Because the truth is that reentry should start the day you enter prison. And the services that Governor Mcgreevey is providing we shouldn't be relying on nonprofits to do that. It's something that the state should do. It should be part of the obligation. And I think one of the reasons it hasn't happened is that everything is seen by the corrections industry as a zero-sum game. So if you're dedicating money to this, it means we're not getting it. And we were never able to overcome that in our discussions about developing a significant and robust reentry program. And I think the key to actually making improvements in the future is to persuade those stakeholders that it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. That devoting resources to reentry issues throughout the course of imprisonment, improved education, getting them ready so they do have the ID when they leave, and they do have a little bit of pocket change to get where they need to go. Issues like that, that should be built into the process. And I can tell you my history with the New Jersey prisons is, when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, we had an investigation of drugs going in and out of Trenton State Prison, and it was kind of a free-flowing thing. So you had people actually going in as addicts and coming out as addicts. So it didn't even accomplish that for them back, and this is a long time ago now. And then in the governor's office, the Department of Corrections was one of the issue areas I had, and you almost got the sense that the issue of warehousing was so important, and the people in charge were sort of their main priorities were no prison riots, no escapes. And so if there were drugs in the prison and that pacified the population, that was kind of okay, right? Because they just didn't want to have an Attica. For those of you who are students, Attica happened a long time ago, but it was a famous, infamous prison riot that occurred in New York. And that was really, that was a legitimate fear that the corrections officials had. You know, an uprising in the prison, it gets out of control, people escape, the public's endangered. So their priorities were really keeping control and not so much correcting. And so I think one of the solutions I think is underway, which is that we're incarcerating fewer people. We've gotten away from mass incarceration of drug users, and I think that's to be commended. I think the bail reform that's taken place in New Jersey is also to be commended, because I think if you have fewer in the population, you might have an easier time persuading folks that the same number of resources can actually result in improvements in the system. So I think things are generally changing for the good. As I say, Governor Mcgreevey and people working in that area have developed a constituency for this. Empowering people who've been in prison to vote, I think, is another important reform that needs to take place. And I think as we incarcerate fewer people, we can concentrate our resources on the 3 areas that Charlie highlighted. You know, the ones who are incorrigible will be treated one way. The people who really don't pose a risk should be treated another way, and the people in the middle are the ones who really need these services. And when we get a system that can actually make those distinctions and not treat everybody in that binary way that Governor Mcgreevey talked about, we'll start to see some real improvements.
Thanks, John. I think one of the ways that prisons keep control is that they do all that they can, seemingly, to dehumanize the prisoner. And so we're dehumanizing people for the amount of time that they are in prison, and then somehow expect them to be able to flip a switch and to enter regular society easily. And that doesn't come about. So I now want to flip it over to John Kufos, and you can perhaps talk about your personal experiences and ask how the process can be made better.
Well, thanks, Charlie. Thanks for having me. It's really great to be back in New Jersey. I got on the road at 5 in the morning today from D.C., dropped my wife and baby off down to my in-laws, and then came up here. But it's such an important issue, and I appreciate Kane amplifying it. And the opportunity to be with Governor Mcgreevey again, who, you know, anything you heard in that very kind introduction that Charlie gave can be attributable to Governor Mcgreevey's belief and support in me throughout the last, perhaps, decade.
Yeah, John just says nice things because I introduced him to his wife, and he'd never thought he had a shot. So I take full credit.
Well, that's something else that's good. And if you saw my wife, you'd know why I felt that way. Right. So she must have been mad at her father or something. I don't know how I got in there, but whatever it is, it worked, and I've tried to stay in. So as you can see, I'm straight to 6 o'clock on almost every issue. So I'll start a while ago, because I think that there's a generational piece of incarceration, and I'm part of that as well. You know, my father was in and out of federal prison, actually escaped from federal custody and was on the run, dragged me around the country for a number of years when I was younger. So I grew up in poverty when he was captured, and then my mom moved us to Ocean County, back when there were no people in Ocean County. So you can imagine, for those of you who remember that, it was, you know, forest and beach, and I grew up in Ocean County, and really was just like this directionless guy, right? I drank a lot, partied a lot, which I guess in Ocean County is what you're supposed to do. But what I was really doing was harboring a lot of unchecked or unresolved abuse issues from that wild upbringing I had, which could be its own seminar. So, by the grace of God, I end up at college, and I end up at Fordham Law in the city, and I end up with a pretty successful law career for about a decade. But the whole time, I'm this functional alcoholic. So I would win trials, go drink, right? No, I didn't drink actually when I was in trial, because I was afraid to lose, because that was my whole identity was crafted around being a lawyer. So this comes to a head 11 years ago in June of 2011, where I'm driving drunk, I always drove drunk, although I hit somebody this time. And I tried to lie my way out of it. Lied my way out of it till I cleared up off the bender and then turned myself in 4 days later. That person would recover and live. Thank the Lord. Nothing I did to help that. Everything I did did not help that situation, made it worse. And that would start my road through the New Jersey prison system. I pled guilty the first opportunity I had and was sentenced to 6 years. Through that time, I started my path to sobriety while on bail, and I was able to string some together and to keep that sobriety by the grace of God. Because think about it, right? I drank if everything was great, if everything was lousy, if I stubbed my toe, if I didn't stub my toe, I drank. So imagine when you cause the world to collapse, nearly kill an innocent person. So I pled guilty. Well, I did my last case. Actually, it was before the New Jersey Supreme Court, Charlie. You may not know that about me. My last case, I won before the New Jersey Supreme Court while I was out on $150,000 bail. So there must be some Barry Bonds asterisk next to that victory. But that was the end of my career. That was the last case, copped out, and then went to prison May 11th, 2012. Sentenced to 6 years, sent to a place called Bayside State Prison, which was the prison that my clients were afraid of. Now, I didn't represent guys charged with bar fights. I represented guys charged with murder, racketeering, etc. Right? So when I learned I was going to Bayside, I was incredibly terrified because those guys were afraid of Bayside. I had no idea what was in store for me. And it was everything they said it would be. It was a violent place. It was a place where there was a lot of racism through the place that, while not directed at me because obviously I'm white, because I was lead counsel to the NAACP in Central Jersey, you could imagine the words they called me, N-word lover and all kinds of things like that regularly. And that was daily. I think the only thing that kept him at bay is I got a lot of lawyer visits, and then I realized at some point someone was going to start breaking their chops about what was going on. Excuse me. Pardon me. And that's the only thing that sort of did it. But let me talk about just some of the things I did. So I took electrical trades, because I want to talk about, I was like, all right, there's only like 3 air-conditioned spots in all of Bayside, and it's 500 degrees in this place. The education wing's one of them. I'll sign up for electrical trades. And I have a bunch of certificates, a bunch of them, but I never touched a wire, ever. If I came to your house, I'd burn the whole joint down if I tried to change a light bulb, right? But I have all these great certificates, and they wonder why no one trusts prison certificates. But most importantly to the journey today, and the journey to the chance encounter I had with Governor Mcgreevey to work for him and help him execute his vision, was I was sitting in the law library, which was the other air-conditioned spots, and I was there. I was reading the New York Times back before it was fake news. Wait, am I allowed to say that? No, I'm joking. I figure at universities I got to keep people going here. So
careful.
So I don't want to get protested on. So, but in any event, I'm reading the New York Times, and I'm talking to the law librarian who has a stack of motions that he's doing for people and a stack of canteen, commissary, soups, candy bars, etc. Inmates are paying him to write motions to municipal courts to get the municipal courts off their backs for like $40 in owed fines, $100 in owed fines. And I'd watch guys go out to the halfway house and parole, and then they'd come back because they either didn't pay their fine, their fee, they had a bench warrant, and they'd be sent back. And I'm like, well, how has nobody fixed this, right? This is like the easy, I mean, I tried a bunch of cases. I was like, this has to be the easiest thing in the world to fix. Well, as Governor Mcgreevey pointed out with the DMV, it certainly is not. So that was my first thing. This is insane, that how could we expect anyone to get a job if this is what's going on? So I go up for parole, and I expect to get hit, denied parole. It's called parole hit. I expect to get, I'm a high-profile inmate, whatever. So I figure I'm just going to get hit, and by the grace of God, they let me out. Except I really didn't have anywhere to go. I had no home anymore. A law school roommate took me in Hoboken, which obviously is not where a drunk goes to get sober, right? But that was the only place I had to go. But so I took it. And that experience in Hudson County, where obviously I'm not from, led me to my meeting with Governor Mcgreevey. And then from there, one of the things we wanted to do was as Governor Mcgreevey said, we needed to just stop these fines and fees issues. If we couldn't stop them from imposing fines and fees, we at least had to be able to clear it up. So here I am, I have all these lawyer friends, but now I got disbarred by one vote. The Supreme Court disbarred me. So I have no law license to do this, but I got a bunch of friends, and now I don't drink. And obviously all my lawyer friends drink, which is why they were friends with me. So we needed something to do, so we decided to put together a big program for Governor Mcgreevey. And what Governor Mcgreevey brought to reentry in this state, in this country, it's hard to overstate. Here's why. I live in Washington, D.C. now. As you probably guessed from the New York Times joke, and New York Times did a nice article about me, by the way, so it's just a joke. But, you know, I worked very closely with the Trump administration on the First Step Act and a number of things. In fact, the reason there's an ID provision in the First Step Act is because I was one of the people jumping up and down about it. I was in the Oval Office when it was signed. I've been on stage with him, et cetera. And I've seen this from a lot of different perspectives, right? Because I've been with the left, and I've been with the very hard right, okay, on both of these issues. Governor Mcgreevey mentioned this is the one bipartisan issue we have left. But there's something else I want to tell you. For those of us, like me, figured when I go to Alabama, Mississippi, other places, and go tour their prisons, I've toured, you know, God knows, dozens of prisons around the country, I would expect to see a prison much worse than New Jersey. And I haven't. I haven't. There are prisons I've toured in the Deep South that you would think, oh, well, screw those people. You know, they don't practice our values. They don't practice criminal justice values. They don't know anything we know. And their prison system's a hell of a lot more humane than ours. And I bring that up because if we know that 97% of everybody who's locked up as I speak right now is coming out, we know that for a fact in this country, and we do nothing to change that problem, we are creating tomorrow's victims. That is what we are doing as a country when we don't make prisons a place of rehabilitation.
Pat, you want to give us your perspective from perhaps the other side as to how we can start to change the prison system to make it better and more capable of letting prisoners integrate into society in a more easy fashion?
Well, I think there's several things that are important. One of them is what we're doing today. Bringing the future of criminal justice into this room to listen to people who have worked in the system and at the highest levels. I mean, we have an ex-governor, we have, you know, ex-attorney generals, we have ex-offenders, you have me. And those of you who had me in class, especially for corrections, know, you know, I've said to you, it's a great job. It really was. The problem we have is that, you know, we do not cater to people who want to make a difference and want to change. And as you heard, we've been doing the same thing over and over for as long as I can remember. And it's when somebody else steps in and says, we need to do this differently. So from my perspective, there are a couple of things that I think are really key and important. First and foremost is we need to create an identity of the people who work inside of prisons. They are not police officers. That's not their job. They are not judge and jury. That's not their job. Their job is to protect society by keeping the dangerous in. Their other job is to assist in rehabilitation. When I was in Illinois, we had a common statement, and that was, good programs make good security. A tired inmate is a good inmate. So that's the first thing we need to come to the realization is that, you know, what we're doing now isn't working. It never has, it never will. The second thing is we need to start convincing the public. You know, Governor Mcgreevey made a great point. You know, this is one of the few things that the left and right can agree on. Okay, so let's get the left and the right, the political leaders, and let's get them leading the public. Let's start having a conversation, a frank and honest conversation about where your tax dollars are being spent. You know, we're north now of $25,000 a year to keep somebody in prison. That's what I said. We're north of that. And, you know, that's in a cheap place. Those of you who know me and you know, and what I do, I have to tell you, I've been in prisons virtually 27 years, all my adult life. Even now, I still visit. You know that. The most horrifying thing I have ever read in my life was the Justice Department's report on the Alabama prison system. They are killing inmates. Guards are killing inmates. Not letting inmates kill one another. Guards are doing it. We are a heartbeat away from Georgia undergoing the exact same scrutiny that Alabama has undergone. And we all sit here going, well, you know, that's the southern states. And though the southern states are, you know, they still have the death penalty. They believe in vengeance and blah, 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 blah. Let's take a trip to Hunterdon County, New Jersey. And what's going on at the female prison in Hunterdon County, New Jersey? 27 correctional employees have been fired, many of whom have also been indicted for criminal sexual assault against inmates. By the way, inmates cannot consent. So the defense of, well, it was consensual. No, it wasn't. And you all know I'm not politically correct, so excuse me, guys. But I believe the governor, the attorney generals, and the commissioners of corrections in the state of New Jersey for the last 3 years when this has been going on need to be in handcuffs. This is a serious matter, what happened up here. And now, it's after the federal government has been here, done a report, and virtually indicted, you know, the entire state of New Jersey, what do? Now we find out we have now pregnant women in custody at Edna Mahan because we have a group of transgendered people there. Whose idea was that? Oh, well, it's easy for you to say. 30 years ago, I got a call from the director's office in Illinois. Pat, I need to talk to you. So I went in, and he said, we have a person who is undergoing transgenderism. That's what it was called then. Where should we put this person? So, you know, we got together the medical staff and the psychiatric staff, and we decided, well, let's find out if this person has, how far they've transitioned. So we need to be thoughtful about how we handle situations. You just can't take somebody's word for it. Listen, if I said I identify as a Yankee, would they let me play in Yankee Stadium without even looking at me playing? And and this isn't about transgenderism. This is about people not doing their jobs. And that's really what I think is really happening in many of the prisons in this country. People are not doing the jobs they are sworn to do. So where does that leave us? Well, for me, I think one of the things is we need to convince the next generation that we can change this. I work with a group of professors in the College of Business and Public Management on reentry for Elizabeth. And we are looking at, you know, is a consortium model better? Is, you know, are returning citizens, are they getting the kinds of services? And I interviewed a returning inmate, and he was saying, you know, I don't know what to do. I tried my best. I went in, I got involved in a program, I got involved in a plumbing program. I went through it for 4 years. I got out thinking that I was going to be able to get a job, and I can't get a job. And I said, well, where are you trying to get a job? He goes, well, I'm trying to work on a construction site. And I go, well, there's the problem, right? You have to be a union plumber to work on a construction job. So why aren't we partnering with the unions? There are so many common sense things that we could be doing. I believe in reentry. believe me, I believe that the three cornerstones are housing, job, and mental health services in general, you know, including addiction and that. One of the things for a long time we thought was most important was job. What we found out through our little group is that housing is probably the most important, because if you have stable housing, you can get sleep, you can, you know, get a schedule, you can get to work on time, you can start to do the things that normal people that stay out of prison do. So, you know, for me, you know, we need to start to convince the American people that we need to do something different. The second thing we need to do is change the way in which we operate the prison system. Not everybody needs to be in maximum security. You know, and hopefully this
What else we're going to do next?
film we're going to show you today looks at a very different scenario of how people are treated. Now, again, it's not the United States, and, you know, they don't have the same problems that we have to overcome. But, you know, we were talking earlier amongst ourselves, and, you know, the federal correctional system was always kind of held in higher esteem. They ain't doing so good either anymore. So we have a real problem. The good news, and I have some good news, is that our prison population is down by 22%. It's just released yesterday. Governor?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in. I'm not as pessimistic as the good professor, but I think, but one area is, as you said, is the prison population is down, thanks to the leadership in the New Jersey State Legislature, Speaker Coughlin, Senate President, and the Governor Murphy, the public health emergency credits. Literally in the past 2 years, 6,000 persons have been released. There hasn't been an appreciable, the reentry community worked diligently, but the level of crime has been relatively static, which is a very good thing. I actually think probably less than 97% should be released. I think the amount of those that have their criminogenic behavior, the problem is today everybody gets released at some point. My perspective is not enough good people or people within that central swath to which Charlie alluded to get released early enough. So it's what are the metrics? John can speak to this more eloquently than I can, but you know, the United States Department of Justice has various indicators and metrics that determine individuals' propensity to commit crimes. Part of this, to go to the professor's point, and John's point is that we have to become more fact-based, more best practice-based, understanding what works and what doesn't work. And so, to go to Charlie's point on the outset, keeping people in prison for huge swaths of time, to what end? Part of that, it requires or demands or calls for a rigorous reevaluation of what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. When John Kufos shares that, you know, he's in 3 electrical courses, never touched a wire. When the professor talked about people getting out of plumbing and not being able, part of this is understanding when people come to prison, they should have an ID card, as the general said, or they should have a discernible skill. It shouldn't just be a layaway plan for your life, where you lay away for 5 years, 10 years. It's about moving people. And I'll just say this, the new Commissioner of Corrections in New Jersey, Victoria Kuhn, has brought people together, a breath of fresh air, and I think we are moving incrementally in a more positive direction.
Thanks, Governor.
Can I just pick up on one piece? On the jobs piece, right? So nationally there's been a movement, and that's what brought me to D.C. was second chance hiring, and that's a lot of where I spend my time. Because there's the availability of jobs, but then there's the job readiness piece, right? And that's where reentry services are critical. And I think that one of the reasons that organizations and the system in New Jersey for reentry, between Governor Mcgreevey's program, between Volunteers of America and some other ones, is because if you look at what the elements of job readiness are and work backwards, you're going to find all the services Governor Mcgreevey mentioned when he opened, right? This has become such a big thing. Companies like Koch Industries, which is who asked me to come to D.C., Business Roundtable, which if you don't know who they are, they're the trade group for the CEOs of this country, have started something called the Second Chance Business Coalition, housed at Business Roundtable. Partners are some of the partners of Society for Human Resource Management, right? Big national organizations. United Airlines just issued a statement yesterday on Second Chance hiring, and they have a big hub here in Newark. So the idea here is there was sort of a chicken or the egg thing when I talked to people around the country. I said, well, we can't really do training, and it's not going to be a good investment, and they're never going to get jobs anyway, right? Because no one's going to hire them. Well, now there's a groundswell of companies saying we're going to hire, but it's incumbent upon you, state corrections, you parole, you community-based organizations, to provide us job-ready candidates. And if you don't do that, well, we're not going to take anybody, right? So now we have people pushing, like Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, right? So we have people at that level pushing. So this provides a really unique opportunity, and I think that, you know, one place New Jersey has done a great job. New Jersey has the best post-incarceration reentry services I've seen in the country, because it looks at the problem like that, right? We need a job, and here's the readiness elements. So I think that we're in a really exciting time, candidly, because of what they call the Great Resignation, right? So you have record numbers of job openings now at this particular point in time. People are staying for 5 seconds and leaving. Wages are going up. So companies are forced to look at other avenues of talent. If we can continue to meet the moment in the reentry community, right, and get people job-ready candidates, we're going to see great outcomes on job placement like Governor Mcgreevey's program has. We're going to see that all over the country. And we're going to see recidivism drop. We're going to see tax bases where we had tax drains before. So there's a cascade effect here, but we're only going to have a certain window here, right? Because it only takes 1 or 2 bad experiences with a particular employee for a company to swear it off. So I think that if you look at things like the Second Chance Business Coalition, you Google it, it's a really exciting time. You'll see these are the largest companies on the planet.
And Charlie, just to pick up what John said, and this is so important, and John's always emphasized this, it's having an industry credential. At the end of the day, whether I have a felony conviction for aggravated assault or whatever, it's having an industry credential that somebody needs me because I have a skill that's marketable, that's discernible, and that has a return on investment. So I'll be operating HVAC at that high-rise building for the next 25 years. I'll be doing welding for the next 25 years. I'll be doing Cisco certification for routing and networking. It's having that industry-recognized credential, which is critically important. And that's what we're about. Whether you're talking about solar construction, and that's a 3-week program, or HVAC, which is a 9-month program, it's having these programs that give you an industry credential that overcomes your jacket. At some point, we've got to talk about secondary education in this country and move to what I believe to be more of a German model. Not everybody needs to study European history. I mean, it was wonderful in the Enlightenment. Some of us need to be thinking about trades, seem to be looking towards more of a German-based system between technical trades and higher education. That being said, this is an opportunity, as John said, industry-recognized credentials that will give people marketable skills that will be a significant return on investment in their lives and the competitiveness of our industry workforce.
And that's why it's so important, as the number of inmates declines, that the fiscal commitment doesn't. And that's a real thing, because that is what will enable the states to provide the kind of training that Governor Mcgreevey and John are talking about.
And we can't lose sight of the need to educate people in the basics, reading, writing.
Yeah.
Like I said, I did 27 years, and I remember this inmate coming to me one day, and he knocks on my door, and he says, "Do you have 5 seconds? I can talk to you about something." And I said, "Sure." So he comes in, he sits down, and some of us older people remember the Golden Books. When we were kids, you know, there were just these stories, and there were short stories, and they were really cool. He pulls out a Golden Book. He opens the book, and he starts reading. And he read the entire book to me, which was about 7 pages. And he closed the book, and he looked at me, and he said, "Thank you, Warden. I can read."
That's what changes people's lives.
I can read. And too often, we forget that, you know, a lot of the persons who come to prison just simply need a chance. They simply need to have somebody point out to them, listen, if you learn how to read, you learn how to write, you know, we can provide that education for you. Then you can go and get the skills that you need in these other training programs to get you a good job.
But to pick up on what the professor said, our guys are coming out, and John can speak. Our guys and gals, I mean, they have a fifth grade mathematics, sixth grade reading level. So then when you go to looking at a plumbing test or a carpentry test that I could never pass with, you know, or operating engineers, but you can't pass it because you don't have the language skills, let alone computer skills, because in the state of New Jersey today, I mean, we're working on changing it, nobody touches a computer. Can you imagine coming out of NJDOC today, I can't apply for a job, and then you're in a halfway house where there are 25 guys, there's 6 computers, it takes you a half hour to fill out an application on a computer if you type the way I do. Maybe it takes you a half a month, and then, you know, you're doing this and you don't have the versatility, you don't have the magic of understanding, you can't hit that little box. And so part of it's understanding, to go back to the point we made earlier, if we really want people to succeed, you know what I love about, the only reason why I'm good at this job is because it doesn't take rocket science. It's really basic stuff. You want people to succeed, give them the tools to succeed. And it's pretty obvious what it is. In this technical-based society, we should be having people become computer proficient in prison. We should be able to have people be proficient in reading, proficient in writing, and basic skills, and then moving them into the technical proficient, industry-recognized credentials.
And, you know, for those of you who are so inclined, if you look up an organization called The Last Mile out of California, Last Mile is run by Beverly Parenti and Chris Redlitz, two great people, tech billionaires, right, who spend their time hanging out at San Quentin. And then they said, exactly what Governor Mcgreevey said. How does no one use a computer? How does no one code? How does no one do any of these things? So they started a program in prisons. They're in a bunch of California prisons. Governor Holcomb brought them to Indiana. So they're in Indiana prisons, and there's another state, maybe Michigan, I can't remember, where inmates are learning to code, right? So they're not just getting computer skills that Governor Mcgreevey's talking about, which everybody needs but nobody gets. They're getting those, and they're actually becoming coders. Right? And it's called The Last Mile. And there is no excuse why New Jersey Department of Corrections shouldn't have something like that. I mean, for all the progressive rhetoric about how great, you know, the criminal justice system is here, and New Jersey has passed some great laws, the infrastructure is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but how on earth do you not have this when you have a relatively small prison system compared to the rest of the country? What do you have, 12, 13,000 people behind bars right now, or at least I think that was the last count. So these are things that are all there. And I remember Governor Mcgreevey and I had the conversation with The Last Mile to try to bring them here. And you wouldn't imagine the bureaucracy they got at the DOC level. And that's with a former governor smoothing out the pathway for them.
Maybe that goes to John Farmer's point about zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're going to put the money somewhere there, they're coming from somewhere else. And that's a dangerous mindset to have, because you have to look at this holistically. I want to change the subject a little bit now and move out of the United States prison system and talk about the prison system in Denmark, Norway rather. Norway may not have the violent crime and gang problems that we have in this country, and perhaps it makes their prison system kinder and gentler. But that doesn't mean that our prison system needs to be as harsh and dehumanizing as it is. So if you folks could run this 5-minute video, and then I'm going to ask you folks to comment on it. This is the prison system.
The United States has more than 2.2 million adults locked up in its prisons and jails. That's only slightly smaller than the population of Houston, America's 4th largest city. Many of the inmates are repeat offenders, which raises the age-old question of what we want out of incarceration: punishment or rehabilitation so prisoners do not return. One Scandinavian country is using a unique approach to achieve the latter. As part of our week-long series here at NBC News looking at criminal justice reform, Kelly Kobiea travels to Norway for our Sunday Spotlight.
In this vast forest of pine and blueberry is what some call the world's most humane prison, Halden Prison, where new inmates are greeted the way I was, with a handshake.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Drug smugglers, murderers, rapists, all doing time in a maximum security prison that feels more like a college campus.
This is home?
Yeah, this is home, yeah.
Karsten was convicted of killing a man in Brazil. This is his cell block with a full kitchen, big screen TV, laundry room.
You have a key to your own cell.
Yeah, everybody have their own key.
He and the rest of the prisoners are locked in overnight. The rest of the time, they choose when to lock the door to their cozy single-bed cells with a TV and a private bathroom.
I used to be in prison in Brazil, and there was a cell just a little bit bigger than this, and there used to be 15 people in the same room.
The point here, to turn criminals into good neighbors.
Always have coffee on the go. Thank you.
Rehabilitation, says the prison governor, starts on day one.
We take the freedom from them, but when they are here, we try to help them to get a better citizens.
Inmates have a normal work week, giving them routine and responsibilities, training to be car mechanics, and graphic designers in a state-of-the-art studio.
From the city hall, we're getting jobs from them.
Learning skills like restaurant prep, where they're trusted to handle knives, can help them get jobs on the outside. They have weekends off and a house available for overnight visits with their families.
Welcome to Criminal Records.
Thank you.
Richard is studying music. He's doing time for murder and served his first 4 years in a Swedish prison.
I was very hateful myself when I came here, you know, because I come from a very, very hard prison system. They really hate the guards, and the guard hated us. Do I feel like a different person now? Yeah, I do.
Here, guards and tutors work side by side with inmates, playing chess or simply going for a walk. It's all about building relationships and trust, even with the prison boss.
You look so happy.
It's an inmate who painted it.
There are cameras and locks, but no weapons, and nearly half of the guards are women.
But do you feel safe?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Well, I mean, we get to know all the prisoners pretty well. We interact a bit. We're with them all the time.
Norway's model isn't cheap. $93,000 per inmate per year, 3 times more than in the U.S. But only 20% of inmates reoffend after 2 years. In the U.S., it's 60%. There's no death penalty, and life sentences were banned in 1981. Even mass murderer Andres Breivik, who killed 77 people in a 2011 attack, was given a maximum sentence of 21 years, though that is extendable. Conservative critics say Norway has gone too far.
What about the victims who actually has this feel really injustice that the people who commit this crime can actually live in this luxury?
But if someone were to say to you, wow, this looks like a pretty luxurious lifestyle.
Most of us aren't going to see it outside for a long time, outside the wall.
But these men admit they've been helped here.
Before I think more like a criminal, but now I start to think more like a normal guy, you know.
If you treat an inmate like an animal, he'd be an animal. If you treat an inmate with respect, he'll respect you back. He is a human being. Yeah, we treat them like human beings.
Lessons many here believe could extend beyond these prison walls. For Sunday Today, Kelly Kobiea, Halden Prison, Norway.
Kelly, thank you very much. You can see more in-depth reporting in our Justice for All series across NBC platforms, including...
So I'd really like to get each of your takes on this, and what was your reaction to the video, and what aspects, if any, of that video and that jail experience can we bring into the United States? And Governor Mcgreevey, I'll start with you.
Probably John's probably better, but I think this should be something that's aspirational. So what that means is, for me, you should earn the right to be in a place like that. So what I think it's you know, if I could tomorrow, I'd tear down Rolway State Prison. I'd probably tear down Trenton State Prison. You You know, our state prison population is 12,000 plus. When I was governor, it was 31,000, so we're down appreciably. So what I would do aspirationally, I would build condominium type housing based on the Scandinavian model, but it's all about behavior. You have to reward good behavior. I sound so old-fashioned. My dad was a Marine Corps drill instructor. My mother was a nurse. Good behavior was rewarded. Bad behavior was punished. And it's not a very complicated, but when you look at Jung, you look at Piaget, and you look at, you know, even some of the more modern behavioralists, psychologists, what's frustrating to me is, and I'll even take a shot at the federal system, that there is no parole. And so that I think that we need to reward good behavior so that at the end of the day, if I play by the rules, we have something called parole, but I would also argue that my living situation should change. Now it can. You can go from maximum, as Professor said, to minimum security, but I think you should have a different experience. And part of that different experience is to literally live differently with different rules, with different rewards, things that everybody in this room takes for granted, but that don't happen behind the wall. And then go to John's point about providing for significant training. So at the end of the day, yes, I believe we should start incorporating a Scandinavian model. It should not be universally applied, but it should be something to which people can, for lack of a better word, earn their way into.
John Kufos, I'll give you a shot at it.
Well, thank you. Well, I think the first takeaway is that they really seem to understand in Norway that the deprivation of freedom is the punishment, right? And the professor hit on this before, right? The loss of freedom is the punishment. That's supposed to be the universe of punishment. Now, if we talk about whether or not a guy should have gotten 21 years for 77 murders, I think that I would be on in a different part.
That's extendable, though. They've noticed that that's extendable. I suspect 21 years from now, he's not walking out.
Well, well, so I think that's, you know, so I think that Norway seems to understand that. And I'm actually supposed to tour that prison in November. I have a trip scheduled out there. So I'm really excited to see it firsthand. Now, the thing that you have to understand is that when you're in prison, you know, every day, when you're in American prison, every day is drama, right? Even if nothing happens, yep. It isn't that you haven't been afraid that nothing was going to happen. Whether it's your cell getting torn up, an inmate trying to fight you, or you know, some other drama, some inmate brings drugs in, etc. You know, the guards, the officers, you know, at least in Bayside State Prison and places like that, have a certain attitude that is you know, where they view themselves as the extension of the justice system, right? That they're there to add punishment to you. So I do wonder how people could flourish, even if, as Governor Mcgreevey said, you could work up to that, right? Because I bet you, there are guys I was locked up with, if you knew at some point you could go there, you're going to see no drama, all program participation, anything you had to do. People act right in prison just to get on the kitchen details so they can eat real food. So if you were to do something like that, and it's always boggled my mind how the corrections unions don't embrace that model, because it would actually make their job a lot safer, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that when they talk about the dollar amount, that $90,000 amount, you know, I don't know the number, the professor might know, but I don't know what the cost of a 60% recidivism rate in this country is just in dollars, let alone in victims and police time and every other thing we have going on. Courts, exactly. So I think that I do agree with Governor Mcgreevey that if we were to have something like that in America, and I think Connecticut has a wing like that, and I know I spoke with the Colorado director just this week. He's looking to put one in. It has to be something you work up to, like an honor dorm.
Dr. McMiniman?
A couple of thoughts. The first is that I agree with what's been said, that you should be able to work your way into a place like that. The problem, of course, is we have to fix where we're sending them to begin with. You know, and you know, the fact that everybody goes to a place where they're behind bars and the bars are locked, and you know, there's all this drama, to borrow that phrase, every day, it becomes more difficult for the inmates to change and to do the things they want. So my first thought is what I started out with, and we need to change the public's perception of what prison should be. And I think that's what all of us should be trying to do. I could just hear, I remember one day I was driving on the turnpike, and I went past the old youthful offender prison, and they were building a volleyball court out there. And I remember then reading in the paper about 2 days later where the citizens of that area were screaming about, how is it possible that we're using taxpayers' money to give inmates a volleyball court? You know what? It's a hole in the ground with sand in it and a little net. I mean, how much did this cost, right? I mean, we're not talking about $1 million investment, but they're screaming about this fact that, well, what about my kids wanting to go to school? Why aren't we taking the money for prisons and giving it to, you know, my kids to go to school? So we need to sell the people, the citizens of whatever jurisdiction we're in, that this is going to save you money so that we can put more money towards going to school. And let me just give you a figure. 10 years ago, if we were sitting here in California, all of the students here would be going to a California state school free, tuition free. That's no longer possible. And the simple reason is because of how big the California correction system got. They had to take the money from someplace. And who got sacrificed? The children. So
I'm gonna switch to, because we're running short on time, and John, I'm gonna give you not quite the last word, because I'll just give Governor Mcgreevey the last word.
Just really quickly, you know, having seen some of our dorm rooms at Rutgers, I'm glad we didn't show that tape here. But Attica, man, you know. Listen, I think it's a great aspirational model, and I always come back to the budgetary part of this because that's really where my experience with these things lies, and the part of the persuasion that we have, the burden of carrying is persuading the public that, you know, it's easy to demagogue these issues, you know, to complain about you're giving them this and you're taking, but to persuade the public that it's a worthy investment and that it's not a zero-sum game, so the corrections officers will know that this is not necessarily just aimed at them, that there's a larger societal imperative at work here that must be honored. And I think that's probably the most important burden we have, is persuading the public of the need for this reform.
I just have one other thing. You asked the question about how much of the burden, how much of a financial burden, you know, the recidivism rate is. And for this, I mean, it's relatively straightforward. In New Jersey, the largest percentage of new admissions to the prison system every year are repeat offenders. Over 35%. Think about if we could just cut that in half, how much money we would save. What if we actually really went out and attacked recidivism and gave people an absolute decent chance to make a new start of their lives and to be productive? We could cut our prison population by a third annually.
And
third of new admissions annually.
Gross state revenues from people earning money.
Right, and exactly. And the other thing is, and I was thinking, I wanted to say this, one of the things about having offenders and ex-offenders working is they make money. They're off the public rolls in many instances. They're paying taxes. They're productive people. I ran a work release program in Illinois in 1977 during the Great Recession. Our inmates made $2 million that year, paid $200,000 in taxes. Think about how much burden were lifted off the taxpayers simply by those 250, 300 people who went through that program that year. These reentry programs, like the one, like the one the governor runs, like, some of the other ones, the consortiums that are here in Union County, who are addressing, inmate work issues. If we can just get these people back to being productive and back to earning, we will recoup all the money we invest in making it better. And that's one of the things I think we need to sell.
Governor, I'll give you the last word.
Well, thank you, Charlie. I want to thank everybody here. I want to thank John Kufos for his national leadership. Some of the people, we'll just all be good. I'm a Kane Republican kind of guy. And my dear friend John and Professor, thank you. But on a serious note, thank you all for being here. I think you heard an interesting discussion. I would say that when we look at the folks in prison, and this is not to absolve them from the responsibility of their actions. We look to reading levels, we look to deficiencies of public schools, we look to healthcare crisis, we look to trauma, that everyone didn't get there by the same upbringing that I had. The upbringing is much closer to the trauma that John faced on a regular basis. So if we're looking at behavioral adaptation, to go to the point that John and I think the professor made earlier, if you were going to try to place somebody in an environment that they would learn new, constructive, healthy behaviors, I don't necessarily think it would be to congregate all of those that engage in the worst behavior in a condensed space, locking them up in a rigid cell structure, and to pray for the Holy Ghost to intervene. And so I think respectfully, we all know what works and what doesn't work, and this hasn't worked. And so whether you're Republican or Democrat, and when you're looking at the Scandinavian model, but there's models in India, there's models in Israel, there's models in Europe, all over, part of what we need to do is to be more entrepreneurial. And all that I would suggest is, if you had a hot dog stand on Morris Avenue, and 2/3 to 4/5 of the people got sick every day, that hot dog stand would not be in business for a terribly long period of time. What I would suggest is the recidivism rate is so high. It might not be the Scandinavian model, but we should be entrepreneurial. One of the great assets of this nation is our willing to engage in the entrepreneurial spirit, engage in looking at different models, and the state should be a vibrant laboratory of not only experimentation but new ideas. So I think part of the challenge here is not to do business the way we've always done it, and to bring about the change we need to accept successes and failures, but to begin to do this differently. And the last thing is, and I just say this from personal experience, John happens to be a hero of mine, not only because he's a dear friend, but frankly, what he went through and what he's come about and what he's done, his political affiliation aside. But part of this is understanding, if you give people the opportunity to do something different, many people will take it. But it has to be real, it has to be tangible, and it has to be meaningful. I know very few people that come out after 4 years, let alone 40 years, that want to go back into that shitty system and that awful life. But you have to give them a meaningful alternative. And I will say they see it every time. And the last thing I say, we just had Federal Express, UPS, they just hired 62 of our guys. 936 Bergen Street in Newark.
That's fantastic.
And the guys were lined up all around the block, all African American, Latino, all wearing their best. And this is just as an aside. I said, I wish I could film this and show this to like middle class white America. Because what you see here is these guys want to work. They want to play by the rules. They want to have a life. Frankly, they never had the opportunity before. And so for many of them, we talk about second chances, many of these guys never had a first chance. So the prison system, to me, is a result of the failures of so much in American society. If we ironically get the prison system right, we can start at the back end and improve the pipeline to make for a better, more equitable, more productive, and decent country. Thank you.
Well, just one thing I want to add to what the governor just said, and I think this is the foundation. We have to remember that the persons we put in prison are people. They are not animals. We need to treat them with dignity. That doesn't mean we don't correct their behavior. It doesn't mean that when it's required that they're not disciplined. But prisons are not places of punishment. They are places where punishment is carried out. In this country, the punishment is the separation from society. And we need to treat people we send to prison as human beings. And that's really one of the major problems and stumbling blocks that we have. And one of my hopes is that somehow I can convince some of you, some of our other professors can convince some of their students and you that we need to lead. We need to take this up. We need to treat people like people. And that's how we're going to get on the other side of this crisis.
I want to thank our panelists, and I want to thank them, and hopefully you've seen their passion. And no matter what you do in your lives, if you take the kind of passion that you see that they have for what it is that they do and apply it to whatever it is that you do, then you're all going to be successful. But it's that passion that drives them, and it's that passion that will drive change. I want to first thank Kean University for hosting us and providing this beautiful auditorium. I especially want to thank Dr. McMenamin, the Executive Director of Kean University School of Criminal Justice and Public Administration, and to Dennis Letts, who's down here, who's really the catalyst for getting this particular presentation going, and obviously to each of our panelists. I think we owe them a hand.
Thank you. You gotta like recognize the big shot.
What? Oh.
Can we just have the president's office make a closing remark? Would that be all
Yeah,
right?
I'm going to be done in a minute, and then
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, great.
And perhaps most importantly, I want to thank the audience, both live and on the university's Facebook page today, because like many of us have said here, it is really you people who are going to bring about the change that is needed. You know, you are the youth of America. You are the future of America. And I sincerely hope that if this talk has done nothing else, it has lit a spark that will ignite the torch that you can carry that needs to bring about the change in the prison system that needs to be done. That having been said, I'll turn it over to the university's office, president's office.
Well, thank you all. I'll be very brief since we had a great session here, and I don't want to keep you guys too long. But on behalf of the president, Dr. Epaulet, he really wants to thank all the panelists for coming and having this great discussion. You know, Kean's a great place to do that, and we're glad you were here. And it was a very important conversation. I know I enjoyed it. I'm assuming everyone else in the crowd had a great time. So thank you all for being here, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Before we leave, I just want to say two things. Thank you to the Criminal Justice Public Administration folks for helping Dennis Bogdan in particular, who worked over the weekend to get this flyer right, because, you know, we're all college professors, but we can't pick up little edits like, you know, periods and commas in the wrong place. But thank you, and particularly thank you all for coming, and Dennis, as always, thank you for being my cohort.
I really appreciate your time.
Thanks,
I know
Charlie.
you're all busy. John's marketing all sorts of things.
Governor, I have 4 years here.